ghost of free will hidden in the system of the false self's control. We are born as ships, stripped of our piece of the mother's breast at birth, grabbed by the white coats, and if you were a male baby in the United States, most likely forced into the horrific trauma of circumcision, cutting off your liquid waste disposer that will become your sexual seed planter to look like a fleshy military helmet. Immediately pulled from our biological mother's arms and undergone extremely horrific legal, sanctioned sexual abuse at birth, sexual birth trauma from this. And robbed of the supposed spiritual aspects of the Jewish version, which is more than likely, of course, it must be surely much worse, done with the rabbi's mouth, but no prayers, no supposed spiritual context, just for cleanliness. Interestingly, it is a courageous young Jewish lawyer who is trying to use the legal system to end this extreme nightmare infant abuse here in the United States. I put a post with his interview on the Jimmy Dore show you can find in my post section. And yeah, I'm really thankful this guy is working to end this widespread legal abuse. For me, it is a huge red flag when the system forces us to do anything. Why do they have to force us to do things? You know, I joke seriously. It's a seriously bad joke. I've been trying to get back to a woman's lactating breast and stay away from the evil white coats ever since. For the first years of life, a human baby is in the theta brainwave state. Why do folks find tiny infants fascinating? Aside from sheer cuteness or their personal desire to reproduce or have a family or some kind of perversion. It is this. They are in the dream state. Exactly that liminal place that we go, you know, when we're almost asleep, where we can interact with other dimensional beings, other dimensions, spirits, angels, devils, entities, and our sheep herding spirit guides. Little tiny babies are always learning. But what they learn is usually how to be in the system of the false self's control, how to be a good goyim or controller. They learn how to go along to get along in the place we call the Hell Realm Matrix. The second occasion I met Dr. Bruce Lipton, he patted me on the arm in the middle of his, 10 minutes or so of explaining things so well as he only can, while reminding me of the old Jesuit saying from Ignatius Loyola, "Give me the child for the first 7 years and I'll make the man." I would not be surprised if kindergarten becomes compulsive or forced like 1 through 12. Why did most of us have to sit there for 9 hours every day under fluorescent lights, reciting supposed facts and figures? Rockefeller knew what he was assigned to do, and my last violation here, almost exactly a year ago now, was a warning for suggesting nefarious intent. Why is that so bad? That he was helped by evil ETs? Of course, talking before that in an angry tone of voice about foul chi surely put the red blinking light on that talk. But they time-stamped that as a reason. Like, it's somehow going to harm folks for me to seed that idea into 20 people's head? It's just a pretty blatant, obvious thing, It's still, I immediately put it as my sample on my Odyssey channel because it was a pretty decent video, although I was acting a little too angry for them. If you have a flesh suit, there's at least a 96% chance you were led down the loose farm garden path to the clip-off by your parents. And these forced worker trainings, it just gets worse and worse as you go up the levels. Yeah, it had to be my hat getting me a little bit while I'm recording, yeah. In my days in elementary school, we had arts and music classes, but I've heard in most public schools they got rid of that. And Flea of the Red Hot Chili Peppers, brilliant Libra peacemaker who loves music, came to the rescue, and he started a music school for children. It's pretty cool. And music classes didn't serve the chief intention, right? Colleges, particularly Ivy League schools, as they're called, really demonstrate the intentions of their designs. In an even more explicit way, what do they produce but rulers of the psychological cage, the rigid control structures of society, or psychological prison CEOs and deciders of the financially enslaved realm, if you will. shot callers of the Matrix. In the digitalized online dystopia version, these folks who want to do this, like make YouTube videos, will often get huge followings to spread the institutionalized propaganda so heavily drilled into their craniums at Harvard and Yale with the Skull and Bones Club, and Stanford, UCLA, UCSC. The more prestigious a school is, the more they're going to drill in the hierarchy. Into their subconscious mind. Whereas folks such as I, even if I'm from one of the preferred clubs in my family system, folks such as me who are not degreed, fully mentally captured, or capitalists selling stuff, who have dared to speak the unspeakable, objective, out of the box, out of the black cube control box facts, especially without being particularly cute or charming. Try to be as much of that as I can. I've been intentionally hidden, deleted, erased, or in that last version, last one that came out about a year ago, given a warning, and hated by more slick video making peers. Unwelcomed into the most of the live streams, and made to look even more foolish, even after publishing over 666 videos about the extreme truth, for speaking the real explicit truths about the good, the bad, and the ugly, especially about the medical mafia and the false gods. Specializing in taboos without being a good capitalist is especially taboo here. It seems like some people never learn. Since the devil has masterfully erected his trauma-bonded, brutalized, hybridized, evil, and violently conquered control system in this place we call Earth, almost everyone has been forced to be a financial slave in the last half a decade, turning up the heat on the pot like the proverbial frog in the pot analogy. And those who talk about it will not get known about, if at all possible, or as Elon Musk said, it's freedom of speech, not freedom of reach. Especially since the operations 5 and 6 years ago, where they finally showed their ugly, well-lubricated, tyrannical, extremely well-organized face, meaning the elites, the Illuminati, the CFR, out in the open, and laid claim on everyone. Yeah, that's how callous, that's how extremely good the forces of darkness are at organization and bribery, trickery, and coercion. Well, that was the greatest experiment in coercion ever. And everything we've seen, trying to take everything, we've seen the availability since then, and perceptions of the actuality of the good in the bigger picture diminish forcibly wherever they can, wherever the devil's people could diminish your availability to see the good. Everywhere. The experiment, the mass formation psychosis, this most egregious example, ubiquitous fear-based experiment, often have worked exactly as planned. Terrified people, whether they have agreed to be cyborg slaves or NPCs or not, obeyed and seemed to rapidly lose the free will they once had a little bit of. But the false self gods still have to remain hidden. Why do they have to remain hidden? You say the Anunnaki are going to return, my dear friend Lyle. I say they've never left. Most of our minds, by controlling our behavior, the way we think, by the proverbial whip, by using the policemen, the ICE agents, the IDF agents to keep you in line, by using threats and fear and the legal system to keep everyone in line. You can see them most obviously in the behavior of narcissists, psychopaths, and borderlines, or what's in other words known as the social diseases called cluster B personality disorders. Most prevalently. But they tried to give us all their minds, as Castaneda said. Now, in the new Spielberg movie, Disclosure Day, as David Icke recently pointed out on the Inspired channel, the narrative has been repositioned. Just like in the Abrahamic cults of Judaism, Christianity, Muslims, and Catholics, worshiping the cube or the cross, praying to a God in the sky who demands blood, and did a great job of psychological and financially chaining us, inverted to the perception that our interdimensional, or ET, psychologically parasitical mind control expert slave masters are good. As the television and later social media and uber popular video channels promote the gods, channeling, the New Cage movement, love and light. It's all love and light. The devil doesn't exist. It's all good. Now act exactly like the devil that doesn't exist. There's the often subconscious vibration you'll feel in many of the most popular channels. Now act exactly like him as we do, and you'll be cool. Loved, promoted, boosted by the mechanical beast system we work and volunteer in here. Even though David Icke, is approaching 1 million subscribers after, getting kicked off and being let back on actually several occasions in the last few years. They finally let him back on for good. Seems like they needed that extra little bit of money. Don't forget the Real People guy. He's self-published. Not only YouTube videos, but like 10 books. And was greatly ridiculed in the early days for spreading the truth. Yes, like Dan Willis, he was a mainstream broadcast news guy after being a famous professional soccer, or they call it football in the UK, players when he was 18, I think, a teenager. So yeah, you think about, David Icke comes from being a well-loved professional athlete and broadcaster. So he's from the establishment, legacy media. But you know what? It's a lot more like that incredibly awesome movie that came out the year I was born called Network. It got Best Screenplay in the Academy Awards, astonishingly. I mean, the idea that Hollywood would give that Best Screenplay and allow The Men Who Stare at Goats, The Matrix, Dark City, The Truman Show to be released shows you that, in their best years, Hollywood was really trying to play both sides of this game of control, mind control, and telling you the truth, strangely enough. But yeah, I love that movie. David Icke is so much more like that guy than like a controlled opposition agent. But unlike that guy, he had the discipline and discernment to not be screaming and flipping out and all that. And yeah, I mean, there is some possibility that some of the Dark Lord's Secret Service agents, the M1s, told him what he can and can't say. That's a possibility. But I don't really... Beyond that, he's not a controlled opposition, I don't think. Except... Except maybe just because he's a stubborn, bullheaded Taurus Cancer sun on the side of truth, courageous enough to face all hell and explain hell's mechanisms. A capitalist exposing the fraudulence of the oppressive system we are in. Sure, he's suffered from the whole cult formation, maybe a God complex, getting worshipped by fans, millions of fans, a massive ego. And the most nasty example of this is I've heard him say a few times that he first noted and invented what we call the Hegelian dialectic, problem, action, solution. Which Hegel, who was in the controller power groups a couple hundred years ago, invented. So aside from that, the hero narcissism issues that he might have there, all he said has been the truth. Those aliens, the gods who are mean, are not your friend. Similarly, but obviously, also in the opposite way, I've written and shared a lot of truth online here about our species' situation in just the last 4 years. But since I didn't sell it, since I wasn't a professional to begin with, since I wasn't very slick or cute, at least compared to some of these YouTubers, unmarried, unestablished, or accepted by society, it seemed to be easy for the beast to minimize my effects. Going back to Musk's disgusting quote I mentioned earlier, to make folks think I'm just a collapsed narcissist, just a wounded guy, disabled guy talking to mental walls in an online one-way mirrored police or CIA room. But I've caught him deleting views, and it's not the case. Because like David Icke, I put a lot of work into this and I'm never going to give up. And I have to work on changing that perception in myself that I threw a lot of pearls into nowhere. Because, while the cliche is true, if I help even one person awaken and get out of the psychological hell cage, it's worth it. And in all honesty, I don't give a rat's ass about fitting in with a profoundly sick society and thinking I'm healthy for it, to paraphrase Krishnamurti's quote. What I do care about is the truth. And the cliche meme, the truth shall set you free, has a lot of truth in it. And I care about freedom, mental sovereignty to share, to begin with, the mental level of sovereignty I've attained, to share awareness, and ultimately that we can figure out how to escape the wheel of samsara and even a ridiculously tall order, I know, I realize. But yeah, one of the ultimate largest goals of my whole channel here is shutting down the memory wipe station, forced slavery, soul-sucking archon maggot brain parasites who feed on our misery. And, I'm not saying that I know how to do that. I'm just, that's one of the reasons why I share all these videos, is because I want to add to the possibility. I want to add energy to the potential of future humans and our essences and even these bodies and this place we sit on, becoming free of these sick, pathological, inverted, perverted, violent, polluting, horrific, psychological and physical hell realm systems that none of them really have the right to be here. They all broke the original cosmic law of non-interference to even come here. And I know, again, it seems like a rosy glasses, delusional fantasy, taking this realm and our essences and flesh suits back out of hell, exposing the criminal robber baron, 1% violent thieves, and their evil overlords for what they truly are. And just like David Icke, I'm not going to give up. I love the actual good. Yes, I've perceived maybe just a small amount of the real in humans, the actual good in humans and in this place. And I celebrate the actual freedoms we still have, codified into that brilliant document we call the United States, used to be the USA Constitution, the Bill of Rights. The words Dr. Bruce said, they gleaned from Iroquois chiefs' mouths that to this day people from all around what we call Earth attempt to move here to be under a document that codified what I call the original operating system, where we are actually given free will, but President Obama, who was in charge of the corporation we call the United States, said it exactly as it is from the government's perspective. You're welcome. If you're an immigrant, you're welcome to move to the U.S. If you want to strike it rich, that's right. If your goal is to become one of these crazy controller rich peoples, you're welcome to move here. If you have enough greed in your subconscious possessing you, you'll be welcomed. You know, I salute your creativity if you have it. I encourage you to reclaim your brilliance out of the mouth of madness. I say, get out of Yaldabaoth's ugly AI fake digital panopticon. If you can, if you still can. I'm reading Angie Speak's book, and it is so ironic because, man, I'm actually glad she doesn't make YouTube videos because she has a boyfriend. And, you know, she's very attractive to me on all levels, and she could easily master the YouTube game impeccably, but she put it down like maybe a year ago or more. Quit for years even. Perhaps seeing what it really is, which briefly her book so articulately and succinctly explains the issues we have here. So yeah, it is possible to UTAT until the good wins, but it is very, very challenging because look who controls the algorithm. Look who controls the whole thing at the top. I mean, who are the biggest funders of Rumble? Yeah, it's very challenging and tricky when, as the guy I interviewed last month, Paul Van Hoek, said, when he had a breakdown while he was a fireman and got MRSA was the greatest thing that ever happened to him. I could really relate, as I was begged for 3 years to go into the system FDR built for the disabled, a little psychological country club prison for those with serious disqualifying problems, seriously close to death. I have of course noticed the sheer hatred and ignorance the vast majority have felt for this. You know, this is why I said I don't want it for 3 years. I said, stop asking me to do that. I'm not going to do it, because I intuitively knew what was going to happen, you know, how people are, how conditioned people are, particularly, you know, the hatred. I didn't realize it was going to be so bad on YouTube, but the vast freaking majority, like 96 or 99% of all people with channels, you know, and the online administrations and, you know, the fellow content creators really resent and discredit receivers, as their entire existence was built around often capitalistic extraction, you know, selling things and grifting. Grifting's okay though. This is where I think they're hypocritical, because I'm not going to say the name, but I finally emailed this person who has a really popular podcast who invited me on, and I got no response. And yeah, I mean, they have a lot of grifters on there. And it's so ironic that they think, oh, that's okay. But a guy who made, 700 videos telling the explicit truth, oh, we can't have him because of his situation. You can never prove yourself to a system of slavery if you are taken care of by a weird socialist version within the same fucking system if you don't sell. Right? You know, it's like I have to sell books if I ever want to build this. That's what it seems like. Or either do something totally different, change it up and go, you know, do a whole different format. But yeah, it gave me a lot of years to learn and discern the truth, study, and apply many self-healing techniques. As you know, when I was 19 years old and I first noticed this really deadly and widespread infection, I found this large Time Life book the library in Somerville, South Carolina was selling for $1 about how shamans would usually, when they were about 19 years old, would get some kind of deadly disease that was incurable, and this is what, in order to cure it, they had to become a shaman and completely destroy their normal life. And so I thought, well, that's what happened to me, you know, when I let Jennifer and Michael stay in my tent at the Bela Flex sleepover event in Green Acres. I mean, it's really what it was. They didn't do anything, but being that close of proximity was enough. And I mean, I was already studying Castaneda books. I already read the Tao Te Ching, and you know, I'd already gotten into natural healing, and right around that era, I started reading labels and eating organic, and quit eating a lot of things like boiled, like pasteurized milk, and you know, a lot of bad shit already then. But unfortunately, I still ate a lot of sugar and carbs for years. It took me years, being born a sugar crack baby, it took me years to quit that. You know, it's the masochistic side of my Pisces moon. It took me way fucking long to quit that. But I'll put myself through many experiments to try and get rid of the horrific, chronic, what I thought was shaman's diseases, two of them really that I have, that really seem more than likely to never leave, like my cancers, and not the other one. Oh yeah, and now I have fucking long COVID or spike proteins. Spike proteins in my blood. If I don't take nattokinase supplements, they fucking come back and make my old benign cancer tumors turn into fucking turbo cancers. So it's like, it seems as though I'm going to have to keep taking nattokinase forever, you know. But yeah, in the end, after over 20 years existing on my Chiron astrocartographical line in Santa Cruz, it was very horrific and wonderful, learning physical and later psychological means to heal myself and others. Yet, having to accept wounds that may never heal. I'm hearing a screaming baby neighbor in the background, and it makes me think about how it completely seemed to destroy any chance I might have there at having a family and reproducing. And now, unfortunately, I agree with Joshua S. John that it's a very evil idea anyways. I could change my perception on that, but it's doubtful because it, unfortunately, as an empathic person, I am just too aware of how much suffering I'd be bringing to that being. Yet having to accept wounds that may never heal, mastering the minimizing of hell, doing my best to be free of bullshit and suffering with two chronic deadly diseases in a realm that's become governed by bullshit and escalating bullshit and suffering rapidly, as we've seen, you know, for the last century, but more in the last half a decade. Finally, accepting the fact that I have to be an immortal. I have to accept that, yeah, the essence that's been recycled, memory wiped, and forced to come back here so many different lifetimes. It doesn't ever go to nirvana or extinguish itself. Unless, perhaps there is an actual point of awareness where a person has achieved everything they can or everything they could possibly want to expand their awareness as an individual spirit and just go back to the pleroma or go back to the great spirit. Yeah, there's a possibility that exists, but I don't really think there's too many of them out there that are really ready to never have any choice again. This is why I don't regret getting rid of the enlightened robot from the future's massive, constantly plastering on and on about this idea that it's bad to have a choice. It's rough, but I have to accept that my essence is an immortal, that death is fake, that I cannot die, and to leave hell, I cannot go to the tunnel of light and get recycled. In other words, I had to accept that I have, especially if I don't leave Santa Cruz, I would just be identify way too much with the Chiron myth and my actual real existence. That the truth is, I feel, is that death itself must be destroyed. I remember a quote, I haven't been able to find the exact quote, but Don Juan told Carlos Castaneda in one of his books that one of the goals of being a shaman is to get so much awareness that you leave the way you came, that you can, just like Tina, whose YouTube channel is called The Dark Matrix, or Tony Sayers, to escape the wheel of samsara, to keep your identity, to not get memory wiped, to not get recycled. The goal is to leave with yourself intact, I think is what he said. Or, in other words, to transcend fully personally, even in my case, whilst seemingly permanently wounded, identifying so much with that archetype. And then, still, right there in Santa Cruz, in that same astrocartographical line, getting hit by a PG&E truck September 1st, 2021, and breaking 15 bones. And after 5 days in the ER, getting 2 cups of blood taken out of my lungs, and then subsequently getting constipated for a couple days. So my friend brought me some raw milk and kombucha because Rockefeller was choosing my diet while I was strapped in there. And then getting rescued by the emergency rescue system, and then after 5 days using only nature, meaning drinking bone broth, sunbathing, CBD and THC to heal all the bones, and when the police report suspiciously came out 6 weeks later and said it was my fault, and we got in touch with 10 lawyers who refused to help me at all, it seems pretty blatant that, something's rotten in that case. But due to it's been so many years since it occurred, and it's too late now, so I decided the best thing to do after being forced to remain in this body and not being, not dying, not leaving then, was to, exactly a year after that, to start this YouTube channel and other platforms channel. And, but when I saw that the power of nature and the flesh suit itself to heal itself, if you give it a chance, get out of the way with your thoughts, with putting poisonous fake foods and chemicals and all the filthy crap that normies put in their body that would prevent it from healing. It it proves that even these flesh suits, in their less hybridized, in their more organic form, are freaking amazing gadgets. I mean, David Icke says they're biological computers, but I would say it's more than that. There's to some degree amazing, biological apparatus, not only for a fucking loose farm, but for our essences to experience things, the original operating system's intent. And so, since all those occurrences, I've learned to face the facts of the horror and the wonder of this existence, the necessity to remain respectful and kind, even in the cannibal carnival show we call the Matrix Lush Farm, and these circumstances that I'm in. But Santa Cruz, California really is an epicenter of the perfection of modern human financial slavery. It is so physically beautiful there. If you imprisoned by money chains or a deadly disease or mental illness, or just because that person was from a real rich family and they become possessed by the archons, the narcissist spirits. In any of these cases, how is there still free will when humans are under this, or their essences and human flesh suits are under this second archonically controlled operating system? Well, it's just like that scene in the Labyrinth I was mentioning in a post recently. There's more ways you can go than just the official obvious ways. There's secret places you can go. There's other options if you have the courage and the capacity to discover them. You could, if you're really strong, you could choose what you believe be truth. And if you are very disciplined, your thoughts, you choose to ignore, evict, and use your goddess-given mental sovereignty to make the archon mental parasite Wetikos feel unwelcome. How about that? If UBI, or Universal Basic Income, was implemented as this dude from California named Andrew Yang was running for president a few elections back, attempting to run under this idea. Of course, they'd never let him get in with it. But I was talking to Lyle about this when I finally ran into him the other day at Western Cliff Drive. If it was implemented without any restrictions, like where you can spend the money or what you could spend it on, would it be good? Well, I mean, look at the current system of welfare and food stamps, and some people use it for good or for surviving and without harming anyone, but it's easy to recognize how, whether it's a so-called pushover in your family or the system, taking advantage of the system itself could cause harm, but not, it depends how aware the person was. The big boys really don't want that. For example, Look what occurred when Gaddafi turned his entire country in Saudi Arabia into a place where the oil reserve wealth was shared with all and nobody had to work. And they actually put $1 worth of gold, physical gold, into the paper fiat money. A friend of mine I met in the Santa Cruz Voluntarius, or an acquaintance I met there, he told me he bought one and it was really beautiful. Well, the false self, the prison wardens really didn't like that, so what happened is a French M1 assassin shot him. Someone from the M1 family shot him dead because they couldn't have that. Similarly, when the parasites are kicked out of control, most options are like Section 8 housing. Even if you can get a place after years of waiting with a deadly disease or nearly dying of old age before they find a place for you in the Section 8 housing system, the structure of the place itself will more than likely extract a lot of loosh from you. But in the hijacked realm, a lot of your free will is still going to be, as long as these Archon buggers and parasites are at the top of the food chain, as long as the matrix is set up so that the scum rise to the top, a lot of your free will is still going to be a multiple choice question unless you are really nearly fully healed and sovereign. So, still unwilling to be imprisoned by an automobile. When you think about it, if you have an automobile, it's going to control you, and the insurance, the crazy cost of gas, fixing the engine all the time, especially if you don't have a mechanic friend or you're not a mechanic yourself. As my friend Nicholas said, it's not one thing, it's one thing with a million parts. So I've always perceived this, ever since back when I had cars, that, man, it could easily just imprison you physically, literally, as much freeing as it is to hop in and ride off where you want to go if you have the money to do that. So still unwilling to be imprisoned by an automobile, and, on the naive side, waiting until I get my solar electric hybrid, thinking what seems like wishful thinking, again, under the Dark Lord's control grid, like they'll ever allow these to come on the market. It seems like they won't. It seems like my wishful thinking dreamer side, my Pisces moon, considers, without a passport or digital ID and being denied the ability recently, twice, I went to San Jose to buy my Amtrak ticket to Louisiana and being denied the ability to bring my bicycle on the trip to the south on Amtrak. I chose to pay $50, $53 to take the Amtrak back down here to the desert and stay in the only affordable town in the entire state of California for hotels, Bakersfield. As I wrote these notes this morning, I'm about to see if I can handle the 105-degree days. Well, I think I was in the room here when it hit 103, 105, but didn't bother me too much to drive across town to the health food store on my bicycle, and for about nearly 18 miles round trip in 100 degrees heat. But of course, on this trip, the traffic around Stockton, I heard a lady on the bus say there was a fire, and everyone and their grandma was on the road, as she said. I don't even think it was an accident, but it was just inching. The traffic was just barely moving And, it made the Thruway bus, the Amtrak Thruway bus, barely get there to Stockton in time, like a few minutes before the train to Bakersfield left. And then the train got here just in time for me to miss the last local bus out of here to the only Motel 6 with bathtubs, and it has a pool out here in East Bakersfield and in the big industrial farms region. So I rode quickly, sweating my ass off in the perfect 75-degree Bakersfield June night. Something you can never experience in the wealthy, controlled West Coast. And checked in here at 11 p.m. on a Friday night to discover or be reminded, oh yeah, I chose to spend another 9 days in a kind of ghetto because it's the only place I could afford in the entire state, and I chose to stay in California a while longer at least. I want to go back to another few events the last week of June in Santa Cruz County, and strangely I saw, maybe checking in here at 11 last night, I saw a dozen people or probably sitting in chairs outside of their rooms. Quite different than it is when it's 105, when everybody's at work or inside their hotel rooms, but they were sitting outside in chairs on the Friday night at 11, of all ages, from teenagers to older people, all ages, stripes, colors, and levels of intoxication. Quite strange this hotel is, yet I respect the good deal and the freedoms I have in my own room, and I respect any hoteliers that can actually give a good deal in 2026 when the big boy financiers have tried to prevent that everywhere. Of course, not being geoengineered to death all night is important. So yeah, as I've said before, you can have free will if you're a good capitalist, choosing to do something awesome, healing, or good to quote, make a living in the capitalist system. Geddy Lee can sing his brilliant late drummer's great lyrics about choosing free will and sell tickets to see him sing it at age 73 for hundreds of dollars for the nosebleed seats to start out, hundreds of dollars each, with a pretty young hot European woman, a couple years younger than me, drummer. But he's obviously telling you by his actions when he sings, I will choose free will, he means as a good capitalist entertainer. Of course, you've got to eat. And if you're intelligent, you'll accept the tragedy that you've got to eat other animals' cholesterol to be healthy, for your brain to be healthy. Fine. If you don't work here within capitalism or take money, you can have free will to choose being a fisherman, a gardener, a wild crafter, an doing animal husbandry, or perhaps, if you're incredibly socially gifted and brilliant, barter, or use your brilliant ideas to, somehow, trade your brilliant ideas for housing and food. There's people I've met that are that much of a social genius in Santa Cruz. Like I heard Kirby Scudder say, I've never paid, when he first moved there at a party at the Firefly Coffee Shop, I heard him say, I've never paid rent in my life. I live with my girlfriends, and he built the Tannery Art Center where they house poor artists. And so It's possible, but these people are very, very socially brilliant people that can do that, and socially healed. But reinventing the wheel, so to speak, must be really difficult. Yet it's possible. If the gods weren't invisible, we'd all know that this realm and these bodies have been hijacked and enslaved. Use this fact against their tyranny to exert the rights to free will that you still have. Draw, paint, jam music, or dance. Anything that's harmless is not going to harm yourself or others. That's creative is a great way to bring it back. Bring your free will back if you've lost it. To experience the real creator, make something. Like Andy and the Stephen King story that was turned into a movie called The Shawshank Redemption, worked in the library and secretly dug a tunnel behind that Sophia poster on his wall, secretly dug his way out of the cage, the Shawshank prison that he was forced to go in for a crime he didn't exist. I mean, so many essences that are forced to be a financial slave, or imprisoned by disease, or imprisoned by cluster B personalities, or relatives on the cluster B spectrum. They didn't deserve that. They didn't do something wrong in a past life. They didn't harm people egregiously to get this horrific fate. No. They went to the tunnel of light, and the false self-gods intimidated them into, agreeing to coming back. They have to get your permission on some level. That's what we've learned from studying hundreds of near-death experiences. They need you to agree. That's another reason why the gods have to stay invisible, because how are they going to get everyone to agree if they just openly feed on our negative, openly feed on our suffering in our face in 3D? It wouldn't work so well, you see. They wouldn't be so effective at controlling almost everyone so well. If you could see what they looked like, even if the Anunnakis just look like tall humans, still, you'd still be able to tell their intent if they were physical in your face. But just like Andy in that movie, you can escape the wheel of samsara by doing things such as learning remote viewing or learning lucid dreaming to start out with, to get used to it. Get used to your essence being freed while you're still here. You could build a community with so much psychological awareness that, knowing for certain that the evil ones are going to try to infiltrate, that you don't allow any narcissist to destroy it. Get smart, as the old TV 1960s spy comedy was called. You can get smart, get mentally, physically, emotionally, and spiritually strong in ways those evil possessed ones and the false self-gods that control them never can. Go out of bounds of the cage in every way you possibly can, even physically, like I did staying at Brad's camp in that no man's land in the Santa Cruz Mountains. Never forget where the real God power is. Within the respectful, awakened human with his essence somehow, after all the horrific shit they've thrown at you, still intact. Resist violence and being violated. Do no harm and take no shit. As a friend of mine on Odyssey.com's avatar reads. That's a great meme. Know who the real decider of your destiny really is, if you're really strong. In an awakened state, you. Even in this divinity that has been repurposed to be a psychological hell realm we call Gaia Sophia or Earth, and even in the loose extraction matrix, evil cannot win in the end. Because they have no divine right to do any of this. Never forget it. They can't destroy all free will and the actual living essence. Take care, folks.